I was the eldest of five. Well, three from my biological father. And I recall going to visit my grandparents who lived down in the coastal, and they were and y'all, most of the people say Billiot, we say Billot in St. Mary Parish. So that was my grandfather. And I recall being on this cliff of the intercoastal canal, which, it's kind of like on the west side, you always have the higher areas. And I recall very vividly with my grandfather and my grandmother and my mom's two younger sisters. Unfortunately, one of the reasons I didn't get the Houma language, my grandparents, my mom lost her mother, father, and a younger sister in a car accident when I was 5. So that side of the family with my grandfather, my grandmother didn't speak French either. So, and then my mom didn't get it. My dad was French. He spoke French as his first language, but mom didn't, so we didn't get it. And then my husband his first language was French. It's like I had all this around me, so now I'm taking it. So anyway, but coming up, my mother, living in the area they lived, they had to go to school by boat. And so my mother I think she went up to the 3rd grade. So she was really basically illiterate. And she always emphasized that, we were going to school. There was no way we were not going to go to school. So going to school, just having that influence, I did not like to miss school. And even when I was ill, she had to make me stay home because I loved going to school. I loved to learn whatever it was. So, that was my big influence about education. And to me now, still education is really important. Growing up in St. Mary Parish, we didn't have the problems like they did in Terrebonne. I was picked on because I looked like a light-skinned Black person. And I grew up loving education. We didn't have anybody in our family had gone to college at that point. My mother had, there was 8 of them, the one that got killed in an accident. So there was 7 left that had children. So coming up, I didn't go to college right out of high school because I didn't have that influence. And I set a goal. I was sharing with somebody one day when I was a senior in high school, I took bookkeeping and I like math. And I decided I wanted to be a CPA. Well, first of all, you got to go to college to get an accounting degree. And it was like, I didn't know that. I had written it on a little piece of paper because the teacher had said to write our goals. And I found it in an old jewelry box that I kept with all these different little trinkets and such. And then I found it probably about 7 or 8 years ago when I opened it up because I was thinking, let me see what's in here. And I saw that to be a CPA. My story for education, I was a non-traditional student. And I took this class that I teach, and it's called the Silver Method, because then I realized I wasn't too old to learn. So I didn't go to college until I was 31. So I earned my bachelor's degree in accounting. Then I went on to get an MBA, and then I actually achieved my goal. I am a CPA. So, and then when I was teaching I taught at Southeastern, and then I taught at USL or ULL now. And then I was praying to be able to help our people. And that's when I was guided to Indian Affairs. But at the same time, my husband was a safety director at Southern University. And that's when they had the lawsuit wanting some more people besides just the Blacks in there. And so when he talked to the recruiter, well, my wife's not white, but she's Indian. And so they recruited me to go work on a PhD. So that's, I like that learning. Right now I'm doing an online class with Cornell for women entrepreneurs. And I'm also involved with a 4-week intensive class. That's why another reason I was exhausted last week it's certifying these new instructors. And I was up in Connecticut on the 21st and 22nd looking at another class. And so he invited me to participate. And it's just getting some nuances. And it's always good to be able to refresh. So, but I'm always learning. And I love, my son made a comment one time, a long time ago. He said, Mom, when do you quit going to college? I said, when I figure that I don't need to learn anymore. So, and when he heard me fussing about my schedule, he said, well, when are you going to take on something else and fill up your plate again? So that's, where I am with education. And it's really important to me.
Can I ask you when you started to learn about the tribe? Was there ever a point at school, for example, that in history class, you got to learn a little bit about our history? Or was that something that you had to pursue on your own and kind of look up and ask questions to people?
Rochelle, last year, before I re-left Indian Affairs, and that's another whole interesting story, I was working with the education. We don't learn anything about our tribe. Now, maybe some a little bit in Terrebonne Parish, but the state of Louisiana does not have anything about American Indian history except Poverty Point. Now, Poverty Point is it's an important area, but I was working with the education department because they were changing up the standard questions and everything. And when I talked to the young lady at the education department, she says the best way to do it is not trying to go legislative wise, but changing the standards. So we don't get that education. The Coshada tribe works with their parishes because, they're a casino tribe and they have that influence to get some of their history in there. But Louisiana is they're not supportive at all for American Indian history. I learned from my mom, just because, I didn't know all the craziness about being, before we were state recognized, I didn't know all the craziness about all the political stuff. But they don't teach anything. It's nothing, which is sad.
So it sounds like it was your family that taught you. You had to kind of ask questions to your mom and learn that way. Okay.
Yeah, because I don't know. Oh, go ahead, Alana.
I was just going to ask, when you were describing that, really sounds like just kind of this innate love for education, that constant, did that come from someone else? Like, did your mom have that, or did you have another person in your life that you sort of, that came from, you think?
I believe it was my mom, because she could not read and write. And as I shared with her, I've got a sister that's the same age as my son. And when Robbie, her name is Robbie, when she was coming along, I was working, I could help her. And, Robbie was having to work and go to college and all this stuff. So I would help her, with finances. And my mother had a fit. She said, that's my job. That's my job. I wasn't able to do that for you, but that's my job. I said, Mom, you are the only one of your 7 siblings who has every one of their children finished high school and go on for further education. Robbie's got she's got a master's in something. My brother had a master's in something. One of my sisters works at the hospital. She does something. Don't ask me what, but and then my other sister, she's had some, so we all had further education. But it was because of our mother, because she knew it was such a horrible time for her. And she was a single mother and didn't know how to read and write. So she had to work some tough jobs to help support us. So just all of that is what influenced me, if nothing else, to get an education. I actually influenced my husband to go he got an associate degree after going to college. He was all excited about me going to college and living my dream. I mean, the man was awesome to put up with me anyway. So that's basically, and and then to go on with this whole idea of education, I started working at Indian Affairs in 1998. And one of the gentlemen who actually was a good friend of my husband's that I didn't know about until we had come together as a meeting, he was Choctaw Apache, and he was sharing with me this idea about his family had some property up in Zwali on Toledo Bend area. So he was involved with the powwows and all this stuff. And he was sharing with me how they brought some of the children from the Choctaw tribe to Zwali. They had never been off the reservation. They had no idea about the McDonald's or Burger King, they never experienced that. And so when he was sharing that with me, I said, why can't we do that at the state level? He said, well, I don't know. I said, well, I said, you helped guide me in what you did. I said, and we'll do it. So we did our first Indian youth camp in 2000 with, it was Corrine was really involved with it. And then several of the others that with the Kashada tribe. So we were able to pull together for a weekend students from the 7th to 12th grade. And there was a place up in Bunkie that let us use, it's a place they use for band camps. They let us use a facility. It had different little cabins so we could separate the boys and the girls and all that stuff. But we pulled together some of the students from the Clifton Choctaw, of course, the Choctaw Apache, from the United Houma Nation. Gina, I don't know if the Gina Band of Choctaw were involved at that time or not. And I think with the Tunica. But what was amazing, not amazing where it was so like, it's unbelievable. However, the students that were from the Zwaili area and the Zwaili, especially Choctaw Apache and the Houma tribe, and they got the Northwest and the Southeast, when they were together and what Corrine and I did, because we had a very small, I think we had 24 students. We had more counselors than we had students that year. But we decided that we were going to team them up. So we took, y'all know Raymond Clark? One of our, I see Brittany shaking her head. Okay. Raymond Clark is very outgoing and all this. And we had this young man with the Choctaw Apache who was really introverted. We teamed them together. And then they were talking about their tribes, but the people up in the Northwest were accepted into public schools because they were considered Mexican. And then the ones, of course, ours were not accepted that well. At that time they were, but they were still horribly mistreated. Well, they came together because they didn't, in talking with each other, they realized that they were not the only ones picked on. Those up there were picked on because they thought they were Mexican. Of course, down in Houma, the savages, or what do they call them? The Sabines, and all that stuff. So that's another thing I consider education, because we brought these students together who thought they were the only ones in the United States or the world that were picked on. So that was another thing. So that was really hurtful for me when I had to quit. Well, I didn't have to quit because I lost two of my mentors, and then I just decided I wasn't at Indian Affairs anymore. But it was such a great camp. We did it for 10 years. Every April usually was the time. So it was really awesome. And then one time, Corrine was telling me about an incident in terrible. But anyway, one of the counselors had told one of the little boys at our camp that he was having problems, because this was with the Title IX program to help with tutoring and all that. He didn't need any tutoring because all he was going to do, just like the rest of us, is go out go shrimping and fishing and hunting. So he didn't need an education. When she shared that with me, I was livid. But that was their mentality. That was back in 1990. Well, no, that was 2000, 2001. So that's another thing that's kind of like they still wanting to hold us back. And that was one of my biggest things. I had worked with the education department when I was there from 98 to 2006, and then started back in 2018 working with the education department. I have no idea where it is. In fact, I've got the name of the young lady who had shared that with me about the best way to do it. So I need to be in touch with her to find out, because they actually had put some stuff in about the Houma. Because one weekend I had to miss there was meetings every quarter, and I couldn't make it because I was going out of town. I was going to Michigan to go to a young friend of mine's wedding. So I asked Roxana to go, and she went to this meeting, and she was actually they were talking about how to word different things and what to include. And she actually had the Houma added to this. But so education is really important to me. Still is.
In those, in the camp, was there curriculum about tribal history or culture, or was it mostly focusing on bringing these youth just having that time together?
Well, no, because we had the counselors from the different tribes, and we shared with the students with this Title VII. In order for it to be covered under this grant that we had, or they had with the different school districts, it had to include the things like the mathematics, and I don't think history was, but it was, we had to include some of those. So some of these people in the different areas taught some different crafts, looking at making flutes, the beadwork, so they could learn the mathematics of it, and then talking in general about some of the things that took place in the different tribes. So it was not a curriculum or not anything as an agenda type thing, but it was just them, it was like sharing.
Yeah, it was just infused in.
I think we had to take a survey after too. The kids did. I remember doing that and writing.
You were part of that?
Yeah, I went to Bunkie. The First Americans Coming Together is what it's
Oh
called.
my gosh.
I don't
did not
remember
realize-
which year it was, but it was right before we moved to Texas. So I was probably 13 at the time.
I could tell you which year if I were in my room, because
So it was the neon green shirts, the neon green, neon yellow shirts. My sister still has one. It was that
I
year.
still have all mine too. So
Yeah.
That's so fun.
But yeah, at the end of it, before everybody was loading up on the buses to go home, we were signing papers, like if we wanted to be included next year, and had a quick survey of how we liked it or whatever, and shout out to certain counselors that we liked and things that we liked for next time, and blah blah blah.
Well, I'm glad you were a participant. I did not know
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
I've got
that's
to-
part of the reason why I'm part of the Houma Language Project. Is because my grandma made sure that anything that was going on in the tribe, we were a part of, because we were in Jefferson Parish. And still today, Jefferson Parish is not really like, people don't think that there are Houma kids in Jefferson Parish. Yeah, so.
Yeah, because I recall convincing the lady that was in Jefferson Parish at that time when I found out they had the Title VII program, she was ready to stop even getting the grant, because it was, to me, well, I think it was just, she didn't think it was that important because it was few people. And I convinced us, I said, no, I said, even if it's two, you need this to be able to share with them.
Miss Pat,
They
could
always
you
say
give
you
a
can-
little breakdown of what the Title VII is?
It was through the Office of Ed, I'm thinking, let me think, it was under Education Department. And it was monies earmarked for American Indians, looking at helping them with the tutoring and anything kind of help to the students. It's very limited dollars. It's per child. Of course, the more you have, the more money you would get. And it was supposed to be to hire any American Indians in the area to assist. Now, Terrebonne Parish, and from my hearing now, Lafourche Parish, they're not. So they've watered it down to whatever they want to use the funds for. So that's what it was for. It was specifically for American Indian students, that the parents had to fill out a 506 form showing, that they were a citizen of a particular tribe, and that's how the monies were counted.
Do they still have those funds?
They still getting some. I know
Okay.
Terrebonne Parish still has
Yeah.
it. Lafourche
But the
Parish still
parents
has
have to say that their children are in these schools. That's the thing though, because I remember, because we'd have the summer camps too, at like, was it Worley and Westwego?
Mhm.
That we would have them there too. And they would stress at the end, because at the end of the week, we always had a powwow so the kids could show off what they learned. They would
Right.
stress to the parents, you have to fill out the paperwork. That's the only way we can keep this going, is if we show that there is a need in these parishes and in these schools. And that was another thing too that went into like the identity politics, because some of these parents were told, no, you can't claim Indian, it's a bad thing. And then here they are wanting more for their kids, and they're having to say that their kids are Indian in order to be able to get these resources. So it was just a big.
Yes, if you have teachers in schools who aren't letting parents know at all.
So it's, but see, at that time when we first started that, there was only 8 school districts that actually had received, well, and then I actually convinced Vernon Parish to come into it as well, but I don't think they're there anymore. So that's the Title VII, and I'm thinking it's still called Title VII. I don't recall. It's I just called it Indian Education.
Yeah,
all
I'm pretty
these-
sure it is, because
Yeah.
I know Greg Capel and his wife Lisa, they can get the camp funds through it's either Title 6 or Title 7.
Right.
But they can get the resources for that, for like feeding the kids and the volunteers.
Well, I know that the Chittimacha had one for their school. Because St. Mary Parish could have had one, but at that time we didn't have a council person or anybody to push it with the St. Mary Parish School Board. But I brought it to the Chittimacha and they applied for it for their Indian school. Yes,
Could I
ma'am.
ask you, Miss Pat, if you've ever been involved with the Dulac Community Center growing up or now as an adult professionally? No?
I only just going to participate because being in St. Mary Parish, of course, we didn't have transportation.
Mhm.
I didn't go I went to New Orleans occasionally, but the first time I ever had a vacation is after my husband and I were here in Baton Rouge and our son was 4 years old. That was the first time I ever had a vacation. I mean, that would you considered a vacation, going off somewhere to another state. And it was in Mississippi. So no, and that's not true, because now I recall my mom, we went down there to visit. It was my stepdad's family that lived in Dulac, but it wasn't at the community center. That's been way back, ladies. I don't even know if it was in existence at that time. Been a long time ago. But no, unfortunately, we did not.
One thing you said earlier that I was curious, and maybe I'll be more familiar with this once you share a little more, but I would be curious to hear when you were describing about the lack of education when you were in school, and talking about the sort of mess of the politics in learning about the history before state recognition. I was just curious if you could like elaborate a little bit about what you mean by that, because it's always good to learn more.
Well, I got really, when I was in school, I didn't get anything about any American Indian history until I got in high school. And like one of my Black friends mentioned when we were working on our masters together, that the history was written by dweebs. And I said, dweebs? She said, yes, dead white European boys. I said, okay. They don't talk about the tribe stuff like we would want them to talk about. So I didn't get any education in school about American Indians, not even the Poverty Point thing. Because, my mother, there was 7 of them. Out of the 7 children that remained alive, none of my mom's siblings got to go through high school. They were all her younger brother and her younger sister went to school until probably maybe 8th grade, something like that. But the rest of them had no education. So that was my biggest thing. And then when I went into Indian Affairs in 1998, and my friend Otis was talking about what they had done and looking at that time, Indian Affairs was not at the Capitol. It didn't have all this crazy political bullshit. I don't mind it being out there. So I had to learn everything I learned on my own and with a friend who worked under the governor's office in Troops to Teachers way back when. So then I was invited to go to participate in all of these different agencies regarding the American Indians, because it was becoming into, you have to include the Indians kind of thing. So one of my biggest things was with the education. And that's when I realized, and I'm the type of person, I think you ladies know, I'm very friendly. I like to make friends. I like to meet people. I like to, whatever. So I went to visit all the tribes. And that's when I found out about how these others didn't have in their areas. They didn't have their history in there. The Chittimacha, the only tribal school here in Louisiana, of course, they would go through it from K through 8th grade. So they had that infusion when their students are going to school, but we didn't have any. So that's the political stuff. It's like now. And ladies, look, I'm going to tell you the history about last year, September 21st, 2021. Okay. Remember Hurricane Ida? After Hurricane Ida, the governor and the chief of staff asked me to go back and leave retirement. They said, well, we want you to be program director under this person and for Indian Affairs. And I made, when they called and when the guy who's the chief of staff had contacted me about going back, because I had known him when I worked at GoSell. And I was thinking he was talking emergency management. I'm thinking, no, that's too stressful. Well, I prayed about being guided back, but I was really praying, if they give me these 3 things, then I'll go. But I was really praying, God, I don't want to go back. Well, God had different things for me. So they started, they gave me the time. I couldn't afford to go full time because my husband was here. I took care of him for 3.5 years. He was a total dependent. So I wasn't going to leave, 40 hours a week. And then I calculated how much I wanted to make to pay for the person I'd have to get to take care of him. And then I was going to be director. Well, they said they wanted me to be program manager. And I said, no. I said, if I'm not director, I'm not coming back. And that was a relief because I'm thinking, okay, I'm not going back. Well, I did. Right? I left Indian Affairs September 21st of 2021. The whole thing is so political right now that, I thought Governor Edwards was going to be really good. He has really turned out to be the worst governor since I went in there under Foster for tribal people. So that's what I mean about the political stuff. In the education, come on, ladies, we're not enough here. They don't consider us enough here to make any kind of difference, which gives our tribe a good heads up, but we don't use our numbers for these different locations to push votes. We don't use our numbers for the federal, the areas of getting good people in there for us. We don't use our numbers, which is another education, a lack of education.
We really enjoyed seeing you at Tasso Time. And we had a really good time just being together with one another. And I'm wondering if kind of what your experience was, how you felt that went, and if there's anything you'd like to see again in future Tasso gatherings.
I enjoyed it immensely, and I'm looking forward. In fact, I've talked to Colleen a couple of times about some things I'm working to help get some stuff for that. But I'm excited about it because to me it was awesome. Because if y'all look at our geography, okay, which 2 parishes are least acknowledged in the Houma Nation? St. Bernard, St. Mary. So it's 4 in between. That's it, especially with Terrebonne and Lafourche. So to me, that was awesome. If I could.
Well, we're really looking forward to next year, and hopefully we'll be able to spend some time with you there again.
Sure. Well, I was hoping to be able to go back the second day, but one of my young friends that I worked with had passed, and his services was on the Sunday. But I enjoyed it very, very much, and I look forward to it again because y'all did an awesome job, and just coming together. And Corinne is like, I call her my older sister, and she's older than I am, and I love her. I mean, she and I can share things together that we can't share with other people, and that was just so warming for her to be able to see her so excited about that. I mean, that was just.
I know, it was her face. I was like, oh my gosh, we broke her because she was so shocked.
Oh yeah, she was just so. She was so honored because she's so humble. She doesn't think she deserves that, and it's like, oh my gosh, I sitting on the enrollment board with all these years because I'd always go pick her up and we'd travel to Golden Meadow, so we had that time to share. And sitting there listening to her and Miss Marina before Miss Marina retired, share. I mean, they knew my grandparents from down in Dulac and Dulorge area way back then, or they knew not them, but people that knew them and the family. So just, hearing that and hearing confirmation about some of the stories my mom used to share with us about being in that area. Because my mom was talking about this stuff and I'm thinking, you making this up. And then they would confirm. I have a book on my shelf called The Last of Last Island. It's about a major hurricane. It's written by some meteorologists. I did a lot of research. It was I'm thinking it was 1856 or either 1865. It wiped out an island down. It was kind of like in between the Terrebonne Parish area and not quite towards St. Mary, but it was an island there. It was a luxury place. So my mom used to talk about that all the time. And I was like, yeah, y'all know how sometimes you look at your mom and think, yeah, okay, right. But they started talking about it. And then Kareem said there's a book about it. So I bought the book. I loaned it to somebody, couldn't find it. So I got me another one and reread it. I mean, it's awesome because it's stories. And they talked about, how it was lost. And it was a horrible hurricane. Of course, back in them times, they didn't have any warnings. So, but then that in another place she was talking about. So that kind of stuff intrigues me so much. And in Kareem last year, it was heartwarming to see her excitement.
Yeah.
And just being there to meet y'all. And then Colleen's dad, because, I've been knowing Colleen forever since her grandfather was on our council. And then some of the others, this young man that he's a Houma family person. I mean, he's a Houma citizen, but he lives in Lafayette and he doesn't have any connection. And when I was talking with him about that and why he was there, he was by himself. He heard about it. And he came just to learn more about the Houma, like y'all were talking about.
Are there any kind of specific things? Because I agree that was such a highlight and like such a cool kind of bridge of community or of generations. Are there any other ideas that you can think of ways to kind of bridge, like to get that excitement from, hopefully it'll continue for younger folks of the generations who will be interested in learning about history and stories, both of, cultural stories, but also family stories and personal stories, and what other ways we could make those connections to give that opportunity for elders to speak and share those histories and those stories, and also create, because, we had that space kind of informally last year, but it'd be really nice to have some other ways to bring that in more intentionally to create those spaces. So I'll just share one idea that we're working on, and if it sparks any other thoughts that you might have. So part of this, our team that we're hoping to kind of keep building towards to have to share at the next event would be using the community center as a specific example, as like a story place and center to talk about both history, because it holds so much and holds, for our families, like Rochelle and I talk about, it's like our whole family trajectory really stems from that place. And if that hadn't existed in the way that it did for the community and how much it served as these kind of launching pads, for our parents, we wouldn't be here for sure. And so that was just one example of a physical place to look at the history of what kind of programs did they do and why did that make such a difference in the community. So that would just be one example of, maybe having like a collection of photos and stories and even like a map to show like these trajectories of people and how much that had this impact. So if you have any other thoughts or ideas of ways that we can connect those stories of history, both kind of bigger scale culture and tribal history, as well as like individual family stories and things like that, so that our younger generations can have kind of intentional spaces and ways to learn about that, would be really awesome.
I've reached out of my mom's, the 7 of them that had children. Her older brother had 12. So I reached out to them to get all of their addresses and everything. And because I'm an old fashioned person and send out hard cards for Christmas. But then I'm also planning on sending my own personal newsletter to talk about the spring event for going back into St. Bernard, but to get them enthusiastic enough to want to participate. In particular, our grandparents, my cousins, my first cousins and my sisters and I, our grandparent came from there. I didn't realize until one of my young cousins passed earlier this year. And when I was attending her services, unfortunately, she passed with COVID. So, anyway, all of them, well, not all of them, but several of my cousins from the different, my uncle and my godmother and some of the others would come in and talking to me, asking me questions. And then one of them actually, he said, well, Pat, he says, you're the oldest grandchild, so you knew our grandparents, because some of them didn't, because they got killed when I was 5. And I had myself and 2 of my male cousins that were, we knew them. They got killed when my sister was just an infant. So my brother didn't get to know them that well. But that kind of thing it would be awesome, especially in the Dulac area. And to be able to have people that knew our grandparents, because I knew them, but I was, like I said, I was a little kid when they died. So I knew them from in the St. Mary Parish area way before they had, after they had left Terrebonne Parish area. And I've got my own story about why, because my grandfathers, and this is kind of going back to the whole idea of Dulac. My grandfather and his I guess his mom and dad were from the Dulac area. And then he and 3 of his brothers went further west to St. Mary Parish. And my thoughts are that, given the location, given the type of living they had with shrimping and fishing and trapping because of the nutria and stuff like that, in order to not be crowded in that area, they just moved towards the west in St. Mary Parish, because so did the brothers. So that's my own, because I don't have my grandfather to verify my thoughts. That's how I'm thinking about it, because then, I knew them when in the St. Mary Parish area. So I think that would be awesome. And it would be awesome to find, and I'm speaking personally, it would be awesome for me to have people like Corrine in this marina, but she don't participate in this stuff, to talk about the fact of my grandfather and how, they knew people that knew them. So, because my grandfather was born in 1890 something. I can't recall the exact date. So I'm talking about, a little while ago. And so, but anyway, I think that would be awesome. Give me time and we'll do it in St. Mary Parish too.
I am so excited to see how our Tasso gathering is going to evolve and continue to hopefully bring more people into the fold. And thank you for doing your part to get your family excited about it and get them plugged in. I'm curious to know, whether it be at Tasso or just in general with all your work with Indian education and in other areas, if there's a lesson that you could teach about Houma history or culture, what would it be? Is something that you'd like to pass on to future generations?
Well, my big thing is about the education stuff, given that, given the conditions that my mom, and I'm saying conditions, looking at the idea of transportation, nothing else but the transportation, not being able to get, because stop and think about it, ladies. Y'all been down the bayous, you know how it is. When it's a nice day, you get in a boat, you have a nice trip. But if you've got some bad weather and you want to put your children on this little boat, and it was sort of like, let me think if I could think. Did y'all ever see Mr. Dardar, Whitney Dardar's little boat that he had? It was like it was the one that he used for his oystering, where they had the little cabin. That's the kind I recall, because when I was little going to visit my grandparents, it really made me feel bad when my aunts had to leave and I had to stay there. But it was a little boat. So can you imagine having your children get in something like that to travel up the Chafalaya to go to school, and how, scary it would be? So to me, that's my biggest emphasis, because so many, like you, all of you, I mean, I was a non-traditional student to embrace this stuff, but that's so important that now, if we continue to share that, don't let anybody put you down, no matter for what. You are you. You're the person's in charge of you. And unless you take hold to that and feel good about it, then you're going to continue to allow people to hold you down. But I think that my biggest passion in reference to education, but I recall coming home from school one day, and I had all A's except one B. And he looked, and he couldn't read and write either. He looked at my report card. I was all excited. My mother was all excited about it because most of the time it was A's and B's. And he looked at it and he said, "You can't do better." And it was like, okay, I'm gonna do better. So I'm gonna get all A's. And then when I had one of my godmother's husband made a comment, I was outside playing on their patio. And this is kind of some of the stuff about why I am the way I am. And I'm not gonna go bad because of it, which some people could, but I didn't. I was outside, I guess I was about 9 or 10, playing with my cousins on the back porch and on a patio kind of thing. And he was sitting inside. The windows were open because it was a nice day. They didn't have air conditioning that much then. And I heard him tell his brother said something about how smart I was and how whatever it was, because I was always fighting with the boys, not fighting, physically, but competing against them. That, that he thought he was saying how he enjoyed being around me and that I was going to be really good. And my uncle made the comment, well, she's not going to amount to too much because look at her dad. And I shared that with my godmother before she passed, I was sharing that with. She said, no, he didn't say that. I said, oh, yes, he did. I said, why do you think I went to school and why do you think I'm doing as good as I am? Just to show him. I said, unfortunately, he died before I could go brag about it. But, it's kind of like those kind of things, if you put it on a child long enough, it's going to push them down. And to me, that's my biggest thing. You've got to promote it. You've got to be excited about it. You've got to embrace. No matter if they got C's and D's, at least give them the knowledge that they're trying and offer them to be able to do better. And that's, I guess that's my biggest passion. I didn't do it to show him so much as I knew I could, because I knew my biological father was a no good SOB.
Yeah.
And that's why I am who I am.
The Houma women are the ones that get things done, and you don't cross a Houma woman. Yeah. Yep.
Well, there's no doubt that you're a tough cookie, Miss Pat. You can fend for yourself, and you're
but I got some
woman.
good dough. I might be tough, but the dough is nice.
Well, thank you again for making time to talk with us. This has been a lot of fun, and we've learned a lot just from sitting down and getting to share with one another. And hopefully we can keep the conversation going. We're all really excited about Tasso time next year. So
I am too. And by the way, it's going to happen would be my, let me think, what anniversary would that be? 52, 34. Would be my 55th anniversary if my husband was still alive.
wow.
55th, yeah. That's why I shared my son, looking at trying to stay positive. When his dad passed, I said, well, son, I said, your dad was tired of being married to me. He's Catholic, he don't divorce. So he decided to leave. He passed on the 14th of March. We would have celebrated 52 years on April the 16th. So it's like,
I'm not the only one that jokes about that.
I know it's hard. And then ladies, I'm telling you, when you lose your parents and you lose your spouse, it's really hard. But good things that you got the good ideas and good memories.
Well, Micah turns 11 on the 15th, and that's the first day of Tasso time. So yeah.
Also, you will be celebrating together.
Yeah, we'll be celebrating. Yeah. Well, that's also, it's weird though, because you met Ron Dufresne, Johnny Soule's cousin. They were together real tight. His birthday is on the 15th. Micah's is on the 15th. My grandmother died on the 15th, or like both. My grandmother died on the 15th, and my other grandma was born on the 15th. So it's like a give or take thing. Like we have to choose if we're going to be sad or happy.
Well, and then also one of the sad things is it's income tax day.
Yeah, right.
Lots of mixed emotions that day.
Yeah, I know.
Well, that particular next year it will be on the 17th, since it's on the 15th is on the Saturday, right? So it'll be the 17th.
Monday the 17th. Yep.
Ladies,
So,
I
yeah.
appreciate y'all talking with me.